Good morning, guys. Today we're going to be going through lesson 3.3 Energy Flow and Ecosystems. Now, we have this first question right here. First part of the lesson, we're going to be talking about food chains and food webs. So, we're going to define them, talk about how they are different, similar, and more importantly, how they're actually very closely related. Now, if you looked in your notes, a food chain is a series of steps, one after another, in which organisms transfer energy by eating and being eaten. So we see right here with this algae, it then goes from the algae to the flagfish, to the largemouth bass, to the anhinga, to the alligator. Okay, and they are one direction. Now, food chains can vary in length. They could be as short as 2 or 3. They could be as long as 10 or 12. It really depends upon how many organisms are involved. So this example right here is from the Florida Everglades. Okay, we would find one similar to right here without the alligator. We could find that here in Sumter County. You go to any pond, you'll see storks and gray herons and cranes that will eat the larger fish, that eat the smaller fish, that eat the algae that are in the pond. So, in some aquatic food chains, though, we have the primary producers all the way down here being algae, these single-celled organisms that are very, very, very small. They're eaten by very small fish and then transfer the energy up. Okay, so there are 4 steps in this food chain that we can see here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So each step is counted when we move from one trophic level to the next. Now, food webs. Now, food webs are a little bit different. In most ecosystems, we don't have standalone food chains. We actually have what are called food webs. So this is a network of feeding interactions or a network of connected food chains. So right here we see a food web that is in the Everglades. So we saw it a minute ago. We had this algae, the flagfish, the largemouth bass, and then the anhinga, and then that goes all the way over to the alligator. So we have several that are all connected in here together. So each path through the food web is an individual food chain. Okay, so a food web like the one shown links all the food chains in an ecosystem together. Now, decomposers and detritivores in food webs. So most producers die without being eaten. Okay, so that's anything that can produce its own energy. And at that point, it becomes detritus. So we see right here our bacteria-associated fungi. Those are really, really, really important to be able to break down all that dead and decaying matter. So if any of you have a pond at home, when you go out there and you step in the water, all of that sludge that you step in the bottom of the pond, that's actually going to be a combination of your algae and of all of your detritus. Now, if you don't have a lot of detrivores in there, typically you can find whole leaves that just kind of get stuck down there. Okay, so without decomposers, nutrients would remain locked in dead organisms. We need those to be released. We see that in this example right here. So we have this decomposing machine right here. It takes these Legos that made this house, separates all of them, and then the primary producers turn around and use those Legos again to be able to build something new. Looks like a little boat right here, maybe a little bridge, but we recycle all of those basic components. Now, let's remember that we don't create or destroy any of this. We simply recycle it. We break it down just like you would Lego bricks into its individual components and then rebuild it as we see fit. Now, disturbance. So this is a very, very, very big thing to focus on in ecology. So when disturbances to food webs happen, their effects can be dramatic. Okay, so if we look at this, everything in this entire food web is connected directly or indirectly to krill. So we see right here, everything is connected directly or indirectly. Now, krill, they're tiny, tiny, tiny swimming organisms. They look like shrimp, and some of the largest animals in the ocean, whales, this is what they feed. Now, these tiny organisms, that are the size of your thumb or smaller, a blue whale, the largest animal on Earth that we see right here, we see this arrow going straight to it. they can actually eat 5,000 pounds of krill in one day. So, I mean, think about it. When you go and you get a shrimp platter somewhere, you're getting maybe a half a pound of shrimp. And that's a lot of shrimp. They eat 5,000 pounds of it every day. In fact, their hearts are so big that an adult human could walk through their heart. So you can imagine they need a lot of this food. Okay. So in recent years, krill populations have dropped substantially. Okay. And because of this, we see that everything becomes affected because of it. Okay. Drop in the krill population causes drops in the populations of all other members of the food web shown. Now, do we find this same concept across the board in different ecosystems? Yes, we do. Okay, so we find similar situations where if you remove one species, it can create large problems. We call that a keystone species. Now, let's shift and talk about our different ecological pyramids. Okay, so we have three of them we're going to talk about. And we really want to address what do each of them illustrate. Now, each step in a food chain or a food web is called a trophic level. I talked about that a minute ago. So that's each step. So we see grass, rabbits, and mice. Then we see snakes. Then we see this large bird of prey up here. So primary producers always make up that first trophic level. Your grasses, flowers, things like that. The caterpillar comes along, rabbit comes along, eats the carrots, whatever the case is. They are always eating those primary producers. Various consumers then will take up every level above that. Okay. Now let's look at this one of energy right here. I want everyone to look at this scale right here: 100, 10, 1, and 0.1. Okay, that's going to be really important when we talk about pyramids of energy. Now, these ecological pyramids show the relative amount of energy, matter that are contained within each. Okay, so let's talk about the three types that we have. Let's start with our pyramid of energy. So there's theoretically no limit to the number of trophic levels in a food web or food chain, essentially, or the number of organisms that live in each level. However, only a small proportion is going to be transferred from one level to the next. So if we look at this between our primary producer and our first level consumer, all of that potential energy that is in that leaf that the rabbit that's right here eats, or that blade of grass, only 10% of that energy is made usable to the rabbit. So the rest of it is lost as heat, lost as other waste products that simply can't be digested. Okay, now this 1%, this represents 1% from this initial right here. Okay, and then this 0.1% is from the initial right here. So we call this the rule of tens. Okay, most of the remaining energy is released into the environment as heat, but we actually need that heat to help with our body temperature. We'll talk about that later on when we talk about the cell. But what we see here is this: 10% of the energy is transferred from one level to the next. Okay, so let's say that you have 400 units here. If we take 10% of 400, that would give us 40. And then if we take 40 and we take 10% of that, that would give us 4% here. Now, in the comments below, I want you to tell me how much would be left in this third level consumer right here. So we had 444, and then I want you to post in the comments below of what percent would be right here. Now, pyramids of energy show that relative amount that are available at each trophic level. Okay, this 10% that we were just talking about, the more levels that exist between producer and consumer, the smaller the percentage of the original energy that's down here from producers that is available to that consumer. Now, let's talk about pyramids of biomass and numbers. Now, they are very useful, but they do have some pitfalls that make them a little difficult to use sometimes. So, the total amount of living tissue within a given trophic level is called its biomass. The amount of biomass a given trophic level can support is determined in part by the amount of energy available, so they are related. Now, it illustrates the relative amount of living organic matter in each trophic level. Typically, the greatest biomass is always going to be seen in the field of ecosystems modeled here. Okay, we are going to address that in our assignment as well. And if you were to look at it, this part where we find our primary producers, it would actually take up all the way up to here, because the mass, the literal mass of all of these plants is far greater than all of the consumers combined. Okay, so a pyramid of numbers will then show the relative number of individual organisms at each trophic level in an ecosystem. Now, depending upon where you are, we could see a lot of variance between our primary producers and primary consumers. Because think about it, the most common animal that we'll find right here is actually going to be insects. Okay, a lot of our herbivorous or plant-eating insects will be found right here, and we find huge numbers of them. Okay, so next summer, make sure you keep an eye out for the locusts that are going to come out, and you will hear how loud they are, how many there are, and how they will just eat up anything that they can get to. Okay, so in most ecosystems, the shape of the pyramid of numbers is similar to that of the biomass for the same ecosystem, with the number of individuals on each level decreasing from the level below. Okay, now in some cases, consumers are much smaller than organisms they feed upon, and as I was saying, thousands of insects may graze on a single tree. The tree has a lot of biomass, but represents only one organism. So we look at beetles. You can have thousands of beetles eating a single pine tree, but the pine tree still only represents one organism. Okay, so in these cases, the pyramid of numbers may be turned upside down, but the biomass may still stay in the normal orientation. So make sure you answer that question from the lesson in the comments below. If you have any questions about the lesson, you can post them below. You can put them in the class Google Hangout, or you can email me at mr.tucker.schs@gmail.com.